Good afternoon, members of the media. Thank you very much for joining us on this Sunday press conference under the office of the Leader of the Opposition. And before I begin my presentation, I just have a couple of announcements to make with respect to some of the activities of the United National Congress. Tomorrow is carded to have a Monday night cottage meeting in the constituency of Bartara Sanwan. Due to other religious obligations of the Hindu community, we have taken a decision to reschedule that particular meeting to that day to be announced. With respect to our crime talks that were initiated, very fruitful, productive crime talks that took place, the first of which took place at the La Jolla Center in St. Joseph. We are continuing our discussions with the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we will next be in San Fernando, not this Monday, but the upcoming Monday, with respect to having your voices being heard with this very serious issue of crime. So thank you again very much for joining us this afternoon. This afternoon I would like to talk to you, members of the media and those of the listening public, on issues in relation to some developments over the last 24 hours in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the Paria inquiry report and also with respect to crime generally. In my hand, I have a report called the Commission of Inquiry, appointed to inquire into the tragic incidents which occurred on the 25th of February 2022 at facilities owned. This report was laid in our Parliament just over 24. As a responsible opposition, we have conducted the various analysis of the recommendation. Those analyses with respect to this Commission of Inquiry report that was laid in Parliament. And two of the more hallmark features that came out of this report: deceased divers, and secondly, prevention in terms of an incident like this not occurring again with respect to Paria and other enterprises of similar nature. On the 25th of February 2022, tragedy struck at number 6 Sea Line Riser, berth number 6 in Pointe-a-Pierre, facility owned by Paria Fuel Trading Company, which resulted in the tragic death of 4 of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago after being sucked into a 30-inch pipeline. And the opposition and the United National Congress stood with those families, and again, we express our deepest condolences to the friends and families of the deceased divers. Subsequently to that, a commission of inquiry was held into the incident that took place at Paria, which resulted in the death of Faisal Kurban, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagisa, and Yusuf Henry. And this report that we have here outlined 52 recommendations, the Lynch report. And based on the limited information, because what was very strange about this is that the government just came to Parliament and laid the report on the table without the Prime Minister or the Minister of Energy making a statement with respect to this report. We have heard that the report has in fact been forwarded to the office of the DPP, and those are some of the issues that I wish this afternoon to address in more detail. So I will not focus on the technical matters with respect to this report, but rather on the legal issues that arise from the reading of this report. And one of the major themes that came out of this report is this. It's that it indicated, it exposed weaknesses in the process, health and safety protocols at Paria. Dangerous weaknesses. Very gaping processes in terms of dealing with health and safety protocols at Paria. So I want to go directly to the particular recommendations that deal with criminal prosecutions in particular. So when you look at the report, for those who may have had a chance to read the particular recommendations of the report, the first recommendation I'd look at is recommendation 40. And for those of the listening public and the media, I'll read what the recommendation says so that you will understand where the findings of this report came from. So the Commissioner is saying that we recommend to the Director of Public Prosecutions that on the evidence before this tribunal, we find that there are sufficient grounds to conclude that Paria's negligence could be characterized as gross negligence and consequently criminal. We do not conclude that the same is true of LMCS, as we are of the view that they were effectively prevented from pursuing a rescue by Paria. Recommendation 41, that the DPP consider charging Paria with what is commonly known as corporate manslaughter. So that is the recommendation. So let's look at who were in charge at the time of this incident. The board of directors of Paria are 1. Newman K. George, chairman, the husband of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Personally, he was a political appointee by this Rowley-led PNM government, hand-picked appointee, sitting on several other state boards. Newman George, chairman, husband of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Fayad Ali, Avi Chedi, Peter Clark, Eustace Nancis, and Reza Salim, all PNM hand-picked appointees. Now, what does the law say about directors of a company? Now, directors of a company owe something called a fiduciary duty towards the company, meaning that they must always act in the best interest of the company. So these 5 board members, led by Newman George, owed a fiduciary duty to the company called Paria Fuel Trading Company. And they had to ensure that the company is being run in such a way that it's in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, being a state enterprise. So this board is charged with the responsibility of the management of the company. We must understand that. They are charged with the management, ensuring that there are the necessary health and safety protocols and that they are actually being observed through the various management and employees of Paria. So they have an overall oversight, supervisory management function of the various departments, divisions of Paria. And while they may try to hide behind the veil of incorporation, they cannot, because they owe a duty to the taxpayers of this country, as this is a publicly owned company, as I mentioned, being funded with taxpayers' money. And now the report is saying, at recommendation 40, that the fact that criminal prosecution is recommended against Paria, it is indicative that they have fallen below the necessary standard of duty of care that is required, and their conduct has been regarded as criminal after the findings of this commission of inquiry. That is a very important finding of this commission. No other state enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago since our independence have ever been found. Their conduct has fallen below such a level that it is regarded as criminal. It is not regarded as just negligent. It is now under the scope of criminal conduct. And the entire board of Paria has failed in its duty, and they must be held accountable. But we have to understand the criminal process behind this. It is not that Newman George, the report is not recommended that Newman George or any of the other board members be charged personally. It is recommended that Paria as a company be charged under the laws of corporate manslaughter. We have to understand and really analyze this point. What this really means is that the state, the DPP, is being given a recommendation through this report to prosecute the state, because Paria is a state enterprise. And when Paria goes to court, it appears to its representatives. And under the law, we have seen that the various sentences that can be imposed on Paria is limited. Limited maybe to a fine. Therefore, if there's successful prosecution of Paria, what it simply means is that the state has prosecuted itself, and then it will fine itself, and then the state pays its own fine. Now, where is the justice for the families in that? There is no justice because there are persons, warm bodies in this country that must be held accountable for the tragic death of those 4 divers. They must be held accountable because this shows that there's a high degree of incompetence, gross negligence, and inability to continue to manage this company. The fact that the Commission of Inquiry has found that the Paria company must be prosecuted under the laws of corporate manslaughter is an indictment directly on the board of directors, who are in fact the controlling mind of the company. And the families and divers will get no justice if Paria, the company, you have to understand, it's not the directors, Paria, the company, is being prosecuted. Now, when we look at that particular recommendation alone, it shows that there is now sufficient and compelling reasons that the entire board of Paria must go. They must go. They must do the right, honorable thing if they can, and they must resign. And failure to do so, the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security should demand the resignation of the entire board of Paria. This is an unprecedented situation in Trinidad and Tobago, and they must not be allowed to hide behind the veil of incorporation and or any other corporate and or other responsibilities to escape accountability in this matter. 4 citizens of this country have died. The board of Paria must be fired and or resign forthwith. They must not receive another cent of taxpayers' dollars after presiding over the catastrophic deaths of these 4 divers. And in fact, any of these directors must not sit on any other state enterprise. They have infected Paria with conduct that is considered criminal, and they will infect other state enterprises with similar conduct. The negligence of Paria has converted state-owned facilities into a crime scene. The negligence of Paria has converted state-owned facilities into a crime scene. And we must never forget what unfolded from the 25th of February 2022. Stuart Young appeared on the compound of Paria. Newman George was there. Members of the senior management were there driving in and out of the compound when the families were left uncovered, unfed, outside, being locked out of Paria without any information. And I'll get to that also. So the board, the minister, and management cannot now wash their hands clean of this incident. Heads must roll. Management, board, minister, and prime minister must all be held accountable for what happened with the divers at Paria. The board of directors and the minister, they all take responsibility when Paria is posting these big profits. You see them congratulating themselves, patting themselves on the back. But when lives are lost, they wash their hands clean of the situation and blames everyone else. The Prime Minister should come along from where he is and fire his board and Minister of Energy. You know, the Prime Minister, he liked to buff everybody. He came in Sawa, I think he buffed up his own MP. It is time, Prime Minister, you take responsibility for the actions of those who you have appointed to certain positions, and act swiftly, and act certainly, and act seriously in this matter. This matter is not any easy matter. This involves, again, we must never forget, it involves the death of 4 of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And the report found that the gross negligence in this matter stemmed from the conduct and the management of Paria and the entire incident. And while we agree that Paria's conduct was criminal in nature, our present laws are not updated enough to get real justice in this matter. We still rely on certain common law principles of corporate manslaughter. The UK, for an example, they have advanced their body of law and incorporated and passed into law the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act. Our Parliament must also fashion similar laws, which is also one of the recommendations coming out of this Commission of Inquiry. And we have to deal with the particular matters in relation to the prosecution. So as I mentioned earlier, the report is recommending that Paria itself be prosecuted for corporate manslaughter. No individual, but the company itself. And I want to go to page 295 of the report, because I want to read what the findings and the recommendations really are. And when you look at recommendation 40 that deals with the referral or the recommendation to the DPP for criminal prosecution of Paria, we have to look what was decided. We have to analyze what the commission said. And I'm going to quote from the report at page 295, and it says this. It says the remaining issue is whether there is or are any individuals for whom recommendations may be made in terms of prosecution. We have concluded that there is not a strong enough case to recommend the prosecution of any one individual. So the report is saying that there's not a strong enough case for the prosecution of any one individual. However, the law permits a corporation to be charged with manslaughter, who can on such a charge appear through their representative, and if convicted, to be fined, which is what I just explained. So there's a difference. There's a prosecution against the company, and there are prosecutions against the individual. The report is recommending prosecute the company, but there's not a strong enough case to prosecute any particular individual. Now, my view and our view on this is that while this report can in fact make recommendations, it can make recommendations with respect to their findings. The Director of Public Prosecution, his hands are not tied. He is not bound only by the findings of the report and or bound by the recommendations of the report. Under Section 90 of the Constitution, the Director of Public Prosecution exercises an independent role from the executive, the government, and that role is stated as the Director of Public Prosecutions shall have power in any case in which he considers it proper to do so, A, to institute and undertake criminal proceedings against any person before any court in respect of any offense against the law of Trinidad and Tobago. So while the report may have made this recommendation, it is our respectful view that the DPP is not bound by the recommendations outlined here, and the DPP can in fact, according to the Constitution, institute any criminal proceedings against any member of Paria for the conduct in this matter. And I think I want to outline some of the findings of what the Commission of Inquiry found with respect to the conduct of the management. And it says this: we're looking at everyone who would have witnessed and viewed the proceedings of the Commission of Inquiry, would have heard the testimony of the various members of the management. And this is what some of the findings of the commission report says. It says, we all remember the name Piper. It says Piper, at page 26 of the report, failed to calculate how much air each man needed to survive in the pipeline, and to apply a timeline to the work of the ICS, which would have made him better informed. He could and should have been asking each professional dive team, when conducted, what is your ETA, and how long before you can deploy, whether camera or diver. Had he done so, he would have been able to assess whether it was even worth getting them before actioning alternative strategies. The ICT never sought to satisfy themselves: A, rescue diving plan; B, a reliable regular air supply; C, an emergency air supply; D, communications; E, means of extraction. All of these features own one abandoned by Yearwood and Fleming Holder, TPM, but none were consulted by the ICT. And this is the findings of the report. It also found in the report that members of the management prevented LMCS who had divers who were competent. They prevented them from conducting any rescue operation. And that is what the report have found, that Paria's management team has acted in such a manner that their conduct has fallen that of criminal, and criminal charges are recommended against the company itself. It goes on to say that Piper closed his mind to any alternatives without even hearing them. We regard this as a serious breach of Paria's duties under the ICS. This is not to suggest that a rescue must inevitably be sanctioned, but to recklessly close one's mind to alternatives carries the hallmark of a serious breach of duty, but which on the evidence we have heard falls short of criminal liability in relation to Piper as an individual. So as I said earlier, while the report may find this and recommendations may have come out, the independent power and duty rests within the Director of Public Prosecutions to determine whether or not criminal charges ought and can be instituted against any particular individual. With respect to the duty of care, the report found that Paria had a common law duty of care given the inherently dangerous nature of the work, and they have breached that duty of care. They have breached the duty of care in terms of Paria made little or no attempt to rescue in what they failed to manage and coordinate the resources that were available. And while LMCS divers were willing and prepared to attempt a rescue, they lacked coordination but were prevented from doing so in any event. So these are some of the very important matters that came out of this report in terms of the standard and the care that Paria fell short of when it was conducting its management of this tragedy at berth number 6. So these are the matters in relation to the criminal prosecution of Paria and or any of the servants and or agents of the company. Now, I want to move on to a very important recommendation, and I think this recommendation, it hurt my heart to read that we had to spend $15 million for a commission of inquiry to tell this government to show humanity to the families of these divers. Recommendation 38, this isn't black and white. This government says it cares about people, but here there's a report telling the government that they need to show humanity. Recommendation 38 says this: where there is a prospect of delay and or a rescue attempt to be made, providing sanctuary away from the public and the media to the immediate relatives on site seems to us not to require any protocol, just common humanity. Just common humanity. Lastly, in situations where families have had their loved ones and breadwinners snatched away from them in circumstances such as these, or any tragedy, real consideration needs to be given to assisting the families in the immediate aftermath of the incident to help them with financial burden that they have been catapulted into. This does not have to involve any admission of liability, merely the recognition that the families of those who have died or been seriously injured may need help. These two recommendations is telling the government to help the families, in essence. Show some compassion, show some humanity towards the deceased families. And you don't need a commission of inquiry to tell you this. You just need a heart. You just need a heart to tell you this. This is saying that Paria showed no compassion whatsoever. We have heard the horror stories coming out of that incident that started on the 25th. And therefore, this government now has to implement a recommendation through a commission of inquiry to tell them, listen, take care of these families. This report, what the government should have been saying in Parliament on Friday, is this, telling us what they are going to do for the families of these divers. What justice are they going to get? Are these families going to be compensated for the loss of their loved ones? Because the report has found that there's a general duty of care on Paria. They breached that duty. That duty of care fell under the standard of reasonable and fell within the realm of criminal. They should now be telling this nation, Minister Stuart Young, should be telling this nation what are they going to do to help the families of these divers. They have left behind children and spouses, and it has been going into 2 years, and these families, most of them who died were the breadwinners of their families, are left without a single cent from the government in this matter. It is embarrassing, totally embarrassing, for a commission of inquiry led by a King's Council to have to recommend to this government to show some compassion where they have been found to be responsible for the death of these 4 divers. The families of these divers must get justice. They must get justice in this case. And we in the United National Congress and the opposition will not rest silently until the families of these divers get justice. It is not enough to take this report, put it on a shelf, give the DPP and say, you fix a partner. You do what you have to do. That is not enough. The recommendations of this report, the 52 recommendations, most of which has to do with health and safety protocols, must be implemented. It must be analyzed. It must be determined. Laws, regulations must come into effect with respect to this report. This report must not sit on a shelf like other commission of inquiries and collect dust in this country. Our hard-earned taxpayers' money have been paying for these reports. This is just one of another commission of inquiry report with recommendations. The government must take swift, decisive action to implement the recommendations of this commission of inquiry report. Heads must rule, members of the media. Heads must rule in this situation. They cannot be left to escape. They cannot wash their hands of the situation. Those who are responsible must be held accountable. And these are the issues in which I wish to raise with respect to this Commission of Inquiry report. And don't forget, it was one of the senior managers who indicated that when asked what if he would rate Paria's response to this matter, he rated it as what? Excellent. Excellent. Today, a Commission of Inquiry is recommending that criminal prosecution be made against Paria. Criminal prosecutions. With respect to the issues in relation to crime and that of national security generally, we have seen what has taken place in this country since the People's National Movement has taken the reins of power. There's always a trend, and the former Commissioner of Police always says it, that every time a particular political party is in power, crime is always on the increase. Every single time. We have heard of the gruesome home invasion, frightening home invasion of a businessman in Arima. What is the government doing to protect the business people of Trinidad and Tobago? The United National Congress, through our political leader, has made the call for the implementation, the introduction, and the passage of Stand Your Ground laws. Stand Your Ground laws, because the criminals are killing our citizens day by day without fear of repercussion. And we are suggesting that the government takes serious steps to implement Stand Your Ground laws. It is your right to defend yourself if someone comes into your home, threaten your life, your family's life, your health, your safety, and that of your property. We are now recording, I believe it is over 30 murders for the year. 30 murders for the year. And all the Commissioner of Police can say is, let us pray. Madam Commissioner of Police, God help those who help themselves. And the UNC, our plan is clear to return law and order. We have indicated our plans and our policies to secure our communities. With respect to securing our neighborhoods, we are right now on an exercise listening to the public of certain policies and plans to implement with respect to this fight against crime, because we understand this is a holistic fight that we have to take place, that has to take place. We have to take back control of our country because the PNM has allowed chaos to run wild and rampant. Enough is enough. We are calling on the citizens of this country to come to our town hall meetings, our crime talks, our consultations. We are coming to you. We are asking you, come out, let your voices be heard, because you are also a part of this fight against crime. The government has refused outright to now consult with the opposition on this issue, and therefore we are left with now consulting with the people, because you, the people, are the important parts of, you build Trinidad and Tobago, you are the important parts of the society. And we are listening to some of the concerns. And one of the concerns that we are getting, especially from the business community, is the issue with respect to the issuance of FUL license, firearm users license. We have advocated in the United National Congress for gun ownership for those who deserve it, those who are qualified, those who have met the various conditions for gun ownership. Because when the criminals come into your home with high-powered rifles, the Prime Minister, through his own admission, indicated that guns are flowing through our borders. What do you have to protect yourselves with when criminals invade your home? When businessmen are being attacked, what do they have to protect themselves with when the criminals come into their home? We are suggesting that there must be legal gun ownership for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to fight back and stand your ground against these brazen criminals. Pepper spray. We have only a meager, I believe, 90 persons, or maybe a little more than that, who have applied with respect to the pepper spray. And the Prime Minister had no issue, in fact, the government had no issue, where ministers were being issued with rifles, high-powered rifles, and we have had reports coming out where certain high office holders were bullying other office holders for the issuance of firearms for their friends, their families, to conduct the killing of animals, I believe somewhere else. And those are issues that we have raised time and time again. And those are some of the issues that we have indicated to this country, because the Prime Minister has no issue. He is being protected. His ministers are being protected. Those who are high in authority, they are being issued with their firearms and ammunition, but the ordinary citizen of this country will get murdered, robbed, raped, beaten, assaulted in this country, and the government does nothing. There's a clear correlation between Hines, Euler, and the murder rate. Clear correlation between Hines, Euler, and the murder rate. Trinidad and Tobago, we have to stand our ground. Trinidad and Tobago, we are asking you to be part of our journey with respect to fighting crime. The United National Congress has supported the government when it comes to legislation. We have supported them with bail bills, anti-gang bills. We have supported with respect to the Evidence Act, with FATCA, white-collar crime legislation, Explain Your Wealth, civil asset forfeiture. All of those legislation, we have assisted the government through amendments and or parliamentary support, even when it's not needed. The fight now is with respect to the implementation of those laws, those policies. We have heard this government time and time again say what? That if you pass anti-gang law, you will lock up, they know the name, address, everything of the gang members. And today, they can't properly convict a single member under the anti-gang laws. We have now been hearing that the prison, that they are getting PlayStation 5 and television in the prison cells. This is Trinidad and Tobago. We have jammers, we have grabbers in the prisons. Prison officers are fighting for their lives. They are being gunned down, assaulted. There's a recent attempt on the life of the Deputy Commissioner of Prison in Barataria. Members of the media, members of Trinidad and Tobago, we are asking you again, join us on this fight. This government has outlived their usefulness when it comes to the fight against crime. The UNC has a plan, we have the policy, and we are ready to secure Trinidad and Tobago from the criminals and also take back power from the PNM. I thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a couple questions here
Sure.
sent in. One is asking, the husband of the Speaker of the House
Yes.
sits on the board of PARIA. Can you confirm if the new head of the Integrity Commission also lives next door to the Speaker as well?
That's a very interesting question. Those are matters that we will have to investigate in full, but that's very serious. And if I just would like to comment on that particular issue, the former chairman of the Integrity Commission, we realized that his appointment was not renewed, stemming from a very tumultuous term as chairman of the Integrity Commission, where various investigations have been launched against the Prime Minister with respect to the Inez Gate Townhouse. And we have seen, with respect to that particular issue, that the Integrity Commission has made certain findings that may have been adverse against the Prime Minister. And I am not going to cast any aspersions on any office holders, but it is history that that particular chairman term came to an end.
I have another question here. With regard to your conclusions or your observations about the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry to the DPP and the, let's say, absurdity of the state finding itself and paying itself, does the family have any use or recourse to the Commission of Inquiry for, let's say, civil action or anything along those lines?
Yep. So in this particular case, without saying too much and prejudicing any future action that may take place, yes, the family members may have recourse to the civil jurisdiction of the High Court in terms of compensation for their loss that they have suffered through this tragedy. But what is very important and telling is that it should not have to resort to that where family members will have to spend legal fees to sue the government for something that the government should have done from the beginning in terms of compensation for the families. They should not have to spend lengthy periods of time in court going through that entire ordeal again after you see the family members break down before that Commission of Inquiry. They will now have to subject themselves again to that particular issue, being cross-examined in order just to get what is due to them in terms of compensation. That is one of the recommendations of this report, that the government show kindness, humanity, and consideration to the deceased family.
What about the lone survivor? We keep mentioning the families of the dead divers.
Yes.
Is he up for compensation as well?
He has recourse to the court. He was in fact victim to a lot of mental anguish. I believe he may have suffered physical damage also in terms of that entire ordeal, and they are free to entertain the civil jurisdiction of the High Court to seek compensation. But as again I said, they ought not to have to subject themselves to that. The government should show compassion.
I have another question. Now, you may have answered this, but I'll read it out anyways from Newsday here. Should the PARIA victims' families rely on moral suasion for the government to pay compensation, or would you recommend any legal mechanisms, such as a civil lawsuit or an application under a statute, such as Criminal Compensation Act?
So, as I said before, they're free to entertain the civil jurisdiction of the High Court to seek damages and compensation for the loss of their loved ones. With respect to the criminal issues, those issues rest directly with the Director of Public Prosecutions. It is for him to institute action, for the police to do their independent investigation. There are also recommendations that Mr. Piper, in fact, be prosecuted under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Those are other issues that will be explored by some of my colleagues who would shadow those particular portfolios. But there are avenues with respect to recourse to the law in order for these families to seek some justice in this matter. I can tell you something. These persons who have died really shocked the nation, and it pulled at the heartstrings of the citizens of this country. And we all felt as though we were connected to these families, especially when we hear the testimony coming out of the Commission of Inquiry. And really, compensation can only take the family so far in terms of justice. I think the state really has to act seriously in this matter to see whether or not the perpetrators of this tragedy be brought to justice, because at the end of the day, the compensation is not going to come out of the pockets of those individuals. It will come out from the state. It will come out from the public purse. It will not come out from those individuals. And there must be, and I think we have to change how we do business in this country, and that's one of the issues with respect to constitutional reform, whether or not it is time for public officials to be held personally liable for their actions, inactions, and or negligence.
Is there a statute of limitations as to how long any of these charges or things can move forward?
In civil cases, in terms of tort, it's a body of law called tort. It's a 4-year limitation, but because of COVID, there was various amendments to that particular act, the Limitation of Certain Actions Act, for an extension of the limitation period with respect to that. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, members of the media, and I just want to remind you again that the Monday night cottage meeting that was scheduled for the constituency of Barataria San Juan has in fact been rescheduled to a later date, which we will inform you of due to religious obligations of the Hindu community. And also, soon we'll be announcing the venue and the time for the town hall meeting in San Fernando, our crime consultations, as we continue to roll out our plans and listen to you, members of the public, with respect to this issue of national security. So we ask you to come out and be part of that. You owe your country a responsibility with respect to this fight against crime. We are here to listen to you. Come out, be part of the fight against crime. Let us stand our ground, stand your ground to secure our communities and our families. I thank you very much.